If I told you that one of the most popular churches in Nigeria, the same one people traveled miles to for healing, was hiding 43 bodies beneath its altar, would you still call it a house of God or something else entirely? This is not fiction. This happened, and it could be happening in a church near you right now. They say when you stand too close to fire, you cannot tell if the warmth is holy or cursed. In the growing town of Odiani in Idemili North, Anambra State, nestled between red dusty roads and green farmlands, there stood a church that made even atheists bow their heads in wonder. Fire of Heaven Ministries. The name alone drew crowds. The building itself was painted brilliant white with golden crosses that caught the sun every morning like a promise from heaven itself. And at the center of it all was Prophet Omenka. He was young, maybe 35, with a voice smooth as palm wine and eyes that seemed to see straight into your pain. When he prayed, his words did not just echo in the hall. They pressed against your chest, made your knees weak, pulled tears from places you thought had dried up years ago. Women wept, men trembled, children sat silent, their mouths open in awe. Every Sunday, the church overflowed. People came from neighboring towns, some traveling 6 hours by bus just to touch the altar. That altar, made of polished wood and draped in red velvet cloth, stood at the front of the church like a throne. Prophet Omenka would lay his hands on it during prayers, and people swore they felt heat rising from the wood, even from the back row. Miracles happened daily. Mama Adeze, the widow, who sold roasted corn at the junction, had been barren for 12 years. After one Sunday service, Prophet Omenka called her forward, placed his hand on her belly and declared, "You will carry twins before this year ends." 8 months later, she gave birth to 2 boys. The whole town celebrated. Her story spread like wildfire. Then there was Uncle Chidi, the mechanic whose legs had been stiff for 7 years after a motorcycle accident. He came to Fire of Heaven Ministries on crutches. Prophet Omenka poured anointed oil on his knees and commanded him to walk. Uncle Chidi threw away his crutches that very day and danced in the aisle. The video went viral on WhatsApp. People said, "This is no ordinary man of God." Every week, buses arrived packed with miracle seekers. People desperate, broken, carrying diseases the hospitals could not cure, debt they could not pay, curses they could not shake. And every week, Prophet Omenka delivered. The blind saw, the lame walked, the oppressed were set free. Or so it seemed. But late at night, when the drums had stopped and the last worshipper had gone home, something else happened in Odiani. Dogs howled near the church compound and then went silent, as if something choked the sound from their throats. Even the bravest stray dogs refused to go near the building after sunset. Neighbors sometimes heard low, mournful wailing drifting from beneath the church floor, like voices trapped underwater. But when they mentioned it the next morning, Prophet Omenka would smile gently and say, "The enemy is angry because we are winning souls. Ignore the lies of the devil." And the people believed him. Because who questions a man whose altar never loses power? Mrs. Uka was not like the others. She was 52 years old, a widow, with sharp eyes and a quiet heart. She had been cleaning Fire of Heaven Ministries for 3 years, mopping the floors, dusting the pews, scrubbing the altar. She never spoke much. She watched. And what she saw troubled her. At first, she ignored it. But then the pattern became too clear to dismiss. There was Sister Ngozi, the young woman with the crooked spine who came for healing in January. Prophet Omenka prayed over her, and she stood straight for the first time in her life. The congregation erupted in praise. Sister Ngozi cried and danced and promised to testify every Sunday. But by March, she stopped coming to church. Mrs. Uka asked about her. She traveled, someone said. She went to her village, another said. No one seemed concerned. Then there was Uncle Chidi, the mechanic whose legs had been stiff for 7 years after a motorcycle accident. He came to Fire of Heaven Ministries on crutches. Prophet Omenka poured anointed oil on his knees and commanded him to walk. 2 months later, his phone was switched off. His house was locked.
His neighbor said he disappeared in the night without telling anyone. Mrs. Uka started keeping a mental list. Mama Blessing, healed of fibroid, gone. Uncle Okon, delivered from madness, vanished. Pastor Jude, the assistant pastor who once questioned Prophet Omenka's methods, transferred suddenly and no one heard from him again. One by one, the loudest testimonies became the quietest absences. Mrs. Uka tried to tell her daughter, something is not right in that church. Her daughter laughed and said, Mama, stop being suspicious. You've been cleaning too many floors. Your mind is tired. That church has blessed thousands of people. Even the governor visits there. So Mrs. Uka said nothing more. But she kept watching. She noticed that Prophet Omenka spent long hours alone in the church at night. She noticed that certain members, always the ones with the biggest miracles, were called for special anointing sessions in the back room. And she noticed the church floor near the altar sometimes felt strangely warm, even in the cold season, as if something beneath it was breathing. And she noticed the smell. Faint, like old meat left in the sun. It came and went, but it was always strongest near the altar. One evening, as she scrubbed the tiles, she heard it clearly, a low moan, almost human, rising from somewhere below her knees. Her hands froze. Her heart pounded. She pressed her ear to the floor. Nothing, but she knew what she heard. That night, Mrs. Uka could not sleep. She lay in her small room, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was going mad, or if something far worse was hiding beneath the most famous church in Odiani.
It happened on a Wednesday evening. Mrs. Uka was cleaning the church alone. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows through the stained glass windows. The place was silent, except for the sound of her broom sweeping across the floor. She was wiping down the altar when her keys slipped from her apron pocket. They clattered against the floor and disappeared through a thin crack between the tiles, right at the base of the altar. Mrs. Uka sighed. She knelt down and tried to reach through the crack with her fingers, but it was too narrow. She would have to lift the tile. She hesitated. Something in her stomach twisted with fear, but she needed those keys. They were the keys to her house, her gates, her entire life. She wedged her fingers under the edge of the loose tile and pulled. It came up easier than she expected, and what she saw beneath it turned her blood to ice. Bones. Human bones. Wrapped in dirty white cloth, stained brown with old blood, and on the cloth, drawn in something dark and red, were symbols, circles, lines, crosses twisted into shapes she did not recognize. The smell that rose from the hole was thick and rotten, like death that had been trapped for years. Mrs. Uka screamed. She stumbled backward, her hands shaking, her breath coming in short gasps. Her mind could not make sense of it. This was the altar, the holy altar, the place where miracles happen. How could there be bones beneath it? For a long moment, she just sat there on the floor, trembling, staring at the open tile. Then her instincts kicked in. She had to tell someone. She ran out of the church, her feet pounding against the concrete, her heart hammering in her chest. She did not stop until she reached the house of Elder Okafor, one of the church's founding members. He was an old man, a retired schoolteacher, respected in the community. "Elder! Elder!" She banged on his door, gasping for breath. He opened the door alarmed. "Mrs. Uka, what is wrong?" "The altar," she panted. There are bones, human bones under the altar." Elder Okafor's face went pale. He stared at her for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether she was mad or telling the truth. Then he grabbed his phone. "We are calling the police," he said quietly. "Right now." Within an hour, the police arrived. Elder Okafor, 2 other church elders, and Mrs. Uka led them into the church. The officers were skeptical at first, but when they lifted the tile and shone their flashlight into the hole, their faces changed. "Get the excavation team," one of the officers said, into his radio, his voice tight. "We have a situation." By midnight, the church was surrounded by police vehicles, their blue lights flashing against the white walls. Yellow tape marked the entrance. A crowd gathered outside, whispering, speculating, praying. And inside, the digging began. They dug for 2 days. The news spread fast. By the second morning, journalists had arrived from the capital.
Cameras lined the street. Reporters spoke into microphones with serious faces, saying words like mass grave of horrors. The people of Idiani stood outside Fire of Heaven Ministries in shock. Some wept, some were angry, others refused to believe it. "This is a lie from the devil," one woman shouted. "Prophet Omenka is a man of God. They are trying to destroy him." But as the police brought out body after body, wrapped in cloth, sealed in shallow graves beneath the altar, the denial became harder to hold. 43 bodies. 43 people who had come to Fire of Heaven Ministries seeking miracles and never left. Some of the bodies were old, reduced to bones. Others were more recent, still wrapped in the... Each one had markings on the cloth, the same strange symbols Mrs. Uka had seen. The police called in forensic experts. They identified some of the bodies through dental records, old missing person reports, and jewelry still clinging to the bones. Sister Ngozi, the woman with the crooked spine, found. Brother Emeka, the banker who vanished, found. Mama Blessing, Uncle Okon, Pastor Jude, all of them, gone, but not forgotten. Buried beneath the altar they once worshipped at. The town of Idiani felt like it was drowning. How could this happen? How could a man stand before them every Sunday, calling down the power of God while bodies rotted beneath his feet? Prophet Omenka was arrested on the 3rd day. He came quietly, without resistance, his face calm, his hands folded as if he was about to pray. The crowd outside screamed at him. Some threw stones, others spat, but he said nothing. He just stared straight ahead, as if he was watching something no one else could see. At the police station, he was questioned for hours. "Did you kill these people?" the lead investigator asked. "No," Prophet Omenka said softly. "I did not." "Then who did?" Prophet Omenka closed his eyes. "My father." The room went silent. "My father," he repeated, his voice distant, as if speaking from a dream. The investigator leaned forward. "And you continued his work." Prophet Omenka did not answer, but his silence spoke louder than any confession. They searched his office, and there, hidden beneath a floorboard, they found it. A Bible. Old, leather-bound, with yellow pages and handwriting in the margins. It had belonged to Prophet Omenka's father. Inside were detailed notes, prayers, incantations, and step-by-step instructions for something he called sacrifices of substitution. The principle was simple and horrifying. For every miracle, someone had to pay. For every healing, a life had to be taken. The power did not come from God. It came from the souls trapped beneath the altar, their deaths fueling the miracles above. If you are still watching this, then you need to hear what happens next. Hit that subscribe button now, because this story is about to get darker than you can imagine.
The people of Idiani did not wait for the trial. On the 4th night, a group of angry church members, former believers who felt betrayed, stormed Fire of Heaven Ministries with jerry cans full of petrol. They poured it over the pews, the walls, the altar, and they set it on fire. The flames rose high into the night sky, orange and furious, crackling like the wrath of heaven itself. The beautiful white church with the golden crosses burnt to the ground. No one tried to stop it. Not the police, not the fire service, not even the neighbors. They all just watched. Some people wept as they watched. Others stood in silence, their faces blank with shock. A few prayed, asking God for forgiveness, wondering if they had been part of something evil without knowing it. By morning, Fire of Heaven Ministries was nothing but ash and blackened wood. The altar, the place where so many miracles had happened, was gone. Only scorched earth remained. Prophet Omenka was charged with His trial was scheduled for the following year, but even as he sat in his cell awaiting judgment, the story was not over. Because the miracles had begun to reverse.
Mama Adeze, the widow who had given birth to twins, woke up one morning and could not see. Her eyes had gone completely blind, as if someone had pulled a curtain over her vision. She went to the hospital. The doctors found nothing wrong. It is spiritual, they said. Uncle Chidi, the mechanic who danced after throwing away his crutches, collapsed at his workshop. His legs were stiff again, locked in place, worse than before. He could not walk. He could not even stand. One by one, those who had testified of miracles began to lose what they had gained. Fertility returned to barrenness. Sight returned to blindness. Deliverance returned to torment. It was as if the blessings had an expiration date, as if the power that gave them had been withdrawn the moment the altar was destroyed. The people who once danced in the aisles now wept in hospital beds. The people who once shouted hallelujah now whispered, "What have we done?" The town of Aidani became a place of mourning. The church that had brought so much hope had left behind only fear and loss. And Prophet Omenka, sitting in his prison cell, said nothing. He just stared at the wall, as if waiting for something or someone. Years have passed since Fire of Heaven Ministries burned to the ground. The site where it once stood is now overgrown with weeds. No one dares to build there. No one even walks through it at night. They say the ground is cursed. They say if you listen closely, you can still hear the wailing beneath the earth. Prophet Omenka remains in prison, awaiting trial. His case has been delayed multiple times. Some say he will never face judgment. Others say judgment has already come, but not in the way anyone expected. Mrs. Uka, the cleaner, who discovered the bodies, moved to another town. She could not stay in Idiani. The nightmares were too much. But she is still alive, and she still tells her story to anyone who will listen, hoping that someone, somewhere, will learn from it. The families of the victims have tried to move on. Some have found peace, others have not. They buried their loved ones properly, held funerals, said their goodbyes. But the pain of knowing how they will never fully fade. And the people who lost their miracles, some returned to their old suffering, accepting it as their portion. Others search for new prophets, new altars, new promises. A few, a very few, stopped looking for miracles altogether and learned to live with what they had. Because this is the truth that Fire of Heaven Ministries left behind. Not every miracle comes from God. Some gifts are borrowed from the darkness, and when the darkness calls them back, it takes more than it gave. Some blessings are not blessings in pain, in loss. And no secret, no matter how deep it is buried, stays hidden forever, even beneath the altar. The people of Aidani learned this the hard way. They learned that desperation can make you blind, that hunger for a miracle can make you. Sometimes the most beautiful church is built on the ugliest foundation. So if you ever find yourself in a place where miracles happen too easily, where every prayer is answered immediately, where the power never runs dry, stop, look closer, ask questions. Because the altar that never loses power may be feeding on something you cannot see. And one day, the ground beneath it will crack open, and you will wish you had walked away while you still could. If this story made you think, if it shook you, if it opened your eyes to something you had not seen before, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video. Let others hear this warning. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story that could save your life or someone you love. And drop a comment below telling me, have you ever witnessed something in a church that did not feel right? Let's talk about it, because these stories are not just folk tales, they are lessons, and lessons are meant to be shared.